19-year-old Jacopo Leone was in a bind. He was a newly entered novice in the house of first probation, seeing if he had the right stuff to be a Jesuit, at the Jesuit monastery at Chieri, Turin, Italy. He'd been encouraged to ask the rector for permission to walk outside in the garden in that beautiful September. Having entered the rector's strangely open apartment, he found books to his heart's delight, especially in a small side room that he called a closet. But he was fascinated and later horrified to find out that the Jesuits had kept close tabs on him, using symbolic language, and kept it all in a book. But that wasn't all. Upon further investigation, he found another book which showed that everyone in the community was neatly summarized and even psychoanalyzed before the days of Freud and listed alphabetically. Any newly arrived Jesuits to the community could, within a few hours of reading this book, know the private lives of anyone he encountered, and especially those who came to him for confessions or counsel. Some would think they had the spirit of prophecy. Here's what Jacopo said happened next. Quote, I was meanwhile disposed to make further and bolder researches. The book which I next opened was a register of revenues, acquisitions, and expenses. In my feverish impatience, I soon quitted it for another entitled Enemies of the Society. At this moment, I was interrupted by a noise which I heard, and scarcely had I time to replace the volumes I had disturbed when I distinguished the sound of numerous approaching footsteps, as if several persons were about to enter the apartment. Then only I began to feel the danger of my presence in the closet. Until then, I had been wholly absorbed and hurried along, as it were, by a whirlwind. But the discoveries I've related proved to be but the prologue to a drama infinitely more serious, and which I'm about to relate. Hi, I'm David Daniels from Chick Publications. Jacopo was stuck in a closet. And at this point, he wasn't about to come out. Would you? At least 8 to 10 people then entered the rector's apartment. Jacopo was in a tough spot. I'll let him explain. Quote, as to myself, my perplexity may be better conceived than described. I was bewildered. What was I to do? Remain? But every moment I might expect to be discovered. And then, should I open the door and break in upon their conversation? But I was much too agitated, too much oppressed by what I just read. Besides, what I had already heard of their projects, their eager animation, and the freedom of their speech all terrified me. I trembled at the bare idea of encountering their inquisitorial gaze. A fearful reaction had instantaneously taken place within me. The Society of Jesus was suddenly revealed to me in darker and more repulsive colors than those under which it had formerly been depicted to me. Confounded, paralyzed, and utterly unable to come to any determination, I remained motionless. Far from being fatal to me, this loss of time was the circumstance which saved me. End quote. Jacopo was ramping up his courage as they continued their confused conversation to walk out among the men and to be interrogated, as he suspected, by the rector. But something worse interrupted his plan. Silence. Had he been discovered? Jacopo froze. Then an authoritative voice broke the silence. Instantly, the meeting proceeded in an orderly fashion. I can only relate small parts and only one main part of the long session that ensued. Let's examine the heart of the story. The speaker continued. You are aware that we have no time to lose. Today, as already resolved, we'll enter into a general view of the interests and the plan of action by which our society is at present to be guided. In other words, this was the current plan of the entire Jesuit order. Who was this person speaking? The speaker continued. Let our first care, therefore, be to change altogether the nature of our tactics and to give a new varnish to religion by appearing to make large concessions. This is the only means to assure our influence over these moderns, half men, half children. This sounds like Vatican II from 1962 to 1965, and yet this referred to something in 1824 that required a major change of Jesuit tactics. We must remember that the 19th century, the 1800s, had many crosswinds. The Enlightenment, industrialization, urbanization, the theory of evolution, monarchies being replaced by republics, calls for new Bible texts and translations, and the Reformation's continuing break from Rome. This meeting marked the Jesuits' change of tactics. The speaker reminded the group, bear ever in mind that our great object, in the first place, is to study deeply and to bring to perfection the art of rendering ourselves both necessary and formidable to the powers that be. This is why the Jesuits surround all the rich and powerful people of the world as advisors and hopefully confessors. This is to keep watch over them and to keep them under their influence and control. Remember, the 1540 charter of the Jesuit order stated they are to be the, quote, confessors of the powerful and the teachers of their children, end quote. If you want more information about the organization of the Jesuits, I wrote a detailed and concise summary in Jack Chick's Crusader comic, Jesuits. Jacopo was frozen with fear, while his mind raced through possible outcomes. He wrote, quote, to open the door now and to present myself before them would have been the act of a madman. All that remained for me was to decide what I should do if I were discovered. And I thought my only possible resource, if I heard them approach the door, would be to stretch myself out on the ground, as if I were in a fit. I felt, in fact, as if I were on the point of being precipitated headlong down a precipice. In other words, he felt like he was being thrown down a cliff. Soon, all the men began to take their seats, much to his relief. Under the sound of the chairs and men moving around, he was finally able to take a breath. The speaker told everyone they must speak clearly and deliberately so that our friend the secretary may lose nothing of what is said. One of them was the secretary. Instantly, Jacopo sensed his opportunity. Glancing around his small side room, he found, quote, a small table with writing materials, end quote. His self-created shorthand suddenly became his most valuable asset. He started writing as quickly as he could. I'll give away a bit in advance. The guy who just spoke, that was Aloysius Fortis, the current Jesuit general, 1820 to 1829. This was no minor meeting. In short, Jacopo was able to write everything every person said, even noting who they were by the unique characteristics of their voices. He didn't dare look. A couple of them he already knew, but the trauma he was then under enabled him to indelibly remember each of their voices, even years later. As Jacopo noted, quote, each one had peculiarities which I have not forgotten, end quote. One of them with an Irish accent took the floor. In order to render Catholicism attractive, let us strive to enlist in her cause the foremost statesmen and historical writers of our own times. Let us employ them to deck the past in golden hues, to sweeten for us the bitter waters of the Middle Ages, and to help us to captivate mankind by the most alluring promises. What? Erase the darkness of the Dark Ages? Exactly. This is called rewriting history. Amazingly, this is exactly what happened in the 20th century. While I was in Bible college, my friends had gotten out different editions of encyclopedias while writing their papers. They showed to me how the newer articles were written by Roman Catholics, which glossed over a lot of dirty Catholic history. My friends told me they're going to have to use only the older encyclopedias, since the new ones were tainted with Catholic propaganda. And here is where it was first proposed, in 1824. Later, the Irishman stated, "For I would not have it lost sight of, that our chief concern must be to mold the people to our purposes. Doubtless, the first generation will not be wholly ours, but the second will nearly belong to us, and the third entirely." Former Jesuit Alberto Vera told us that the Jesuits always worked their plans in 50 or 100-year increments. Soon after, the Irishman said, "Yes, the people are the vast domain we have to conquer. We shall know how, by marvelous stories and gorgeous shows, to exorcise heresy from the heads and hearts of the multitude. Then the Bible, that serpent, which with head erect and eyes flashing fire threatens us with its venom, whilst it trails along the ground, shall be changed again into a rod as soon as we are able to seize it. And what wounds will we not inflict with it upon these hardened pharaohs and their cunning magicians? What miracles will we not work by its means? Oh, then, mysterious rod, we will not again suffer thee to escape from our hands and fall to the earth. For you know but too well that for 3 centuries past this cruel asp hath left us no repose. You know well with what folds it entwines us, and with what fangs it gnaws us." They really felt threatened by the Bible, didn't they? An older man, grave and sedate, then spoke. "My brethren, as to the Bible, be advised by me. For our greater good, let us carefully avoid this ground. For if I may tell you openly what I think of this book, it is not at all for us. It is against us. I do not at all wonder at the invincible obstinacy it engenders in all those who regard its verses as inspired." He related how, as a youth, he had read through the Bible 6 times, only to find in it nothing about, quote, the Virgin, the Mass, purgatory, or relics. As a young budding Jesuit, he admitted that the Bible, quote, actually sets forth a system of religion altogether different from that taught in the schools, and thus all my ideas were thrown into confusion. After his confessor separated him, calling him a young man set apart, able to know higher things in Catholicism, he confided this to his compatriots. "Consequently, let us lay down this principle in public to act as if we had nothing to fear from such a book, but rather as if it were favorable for us. In private, to describe it as dangerous and hurtful, or, where this would not be prudent, to declare that it's the germ, of which Catholicism is the complete and majestic development. We shall thus provide ourselves with an arsenal 1,000 times better stored than the biblical arsenal of Protestantism." A French Jesuit in the group later described how to overthrow Protestantism. "The thing, therefore, is to be done is to bring them, Protestants, back from the Bible to Catholic authority." Today, you cannot find many Bibles without a Jesuit somewhere connected. In the United Bible Society's Greek text is the name of Catholic Cardinal Carlo Maria Martini, S.J. in Advanced Greek is Maximilian Zerwick, S.J. In fact, a Jesuit, Daniel J. Harrington, S.J., along with 9 Fuller professors, contributed to the Common English Study Bible with Apocrypha. And of course, my old Fuller Seminary approves of this study Bible. The dean of the Fuller School of Theology was the general editor. And if you don't find Jesuits, you find the work of Jesuits. And where you don't find the works written by Jesuits, you find people taught by Jesuits. And where you don't find people taught by Jesuits, you find people parroting the things taught by Jesuits. You simply cannot avoid it. That is, unless you trust the words of that rod become a serpent, the King James Bible. They don't like how it threatens and gnaws at them. They are almost proverbially under every rock, or at least their influence is. After hours of this discussion, they finally adjourned for dinner. About 15 minutes before darkness overtook the small book room. Jacopo quickly rolled up all he'd written and stuck it in his sock. Then God let our 19-year-old sneak out of that room and take refuge in a church pew he was used to sitting in with his Jesuit guardian angel. Jacopo was totally exhausted and replayed again and again the words of these Jesuit leaders who started to take the form of devils in his mind. Everything he had believed had been shattered in one afternoon. He fell into a deep sleep. About 9 or 10 at night, he was suddenly awakened by someone shouting his name. He got up and was soon surrounded by Jesuits and questions. By this time, he was visibly ill, but even that was a gift from God. They were not satisfied with his answers, and he was visibly embarrassed. But suddenly, he took advantage of their opinion of his delicate nature. He wrote, quote, "There would have been no end to all this if, wearied with so many questions and making a bold effort, I had not begun to complain bitterly, groaning out that they tortured me, that I was exhausted with suffering, that I was dying." An aged father, whom I recognized by his voice as one of those who had spoken during the meeting, suddenly cut short these puzzling interrogatories. "Let me see," said he, taking hold of my hand and feeling my pulse, while the rest stood keenly watching me in silence. Then, after a few moments of serious thought, "Poor lad," said he, "he's in a burning fever. To bed with him immediately. Let the physician see him at once. I never in my life saw anyone in such violent agitation. He's in a tremendous fever." This was sufficient to put an end to their suspicions. I don't have time to tell you how he was able to escape the Jesuits, but you can read it for yourself in The Jesuit Conspiracy, The Secret Plan of the Order by Jacopo Leone, prefaced by M. Victor Considerant. It is available on Amazon and Google, at least for now. So now you know how one person discovered and later exposed the plans of the Jesuits. But what would happen if a Jesuit were so confident that he openly admitted the Jesuits' plan to a local priest? That's in the next video. Until then, God bless you and have a wonderful day.